Welcome again to Smarties Studio. Smarties Studio is a definitive home for the stories, talent, and strategic thinking behind the Smarties' great work. It's beyond the stage, the offering from a marketing community, building a deeper lens into campaigns, driving meaningful business growth. Is the strategic intelligence behind the scenes and with the leaders in the peer network, providing a global perspective with access to award-winning thinking, sharing unfiltered insights which drive real business results.
Received 20% on my lunch today.
This is where you take back your lunch.
Such a cool idea.
No more meetings.
So with that, let me welcome Mukundi and GT to this conversation. Welcome, guys. Good to have you.
Hi, Rohit. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. So let me start with this very broad paintbrush question to you. What was the narrative that you were trying to build for this campaign? Was this designed or did it happen to fall into your lap of an insight that you may have heard of, or was it being built? And a brief summary of what this campaign is all about.
Okay, cool. Hi, Rohit. Thanks for having us on. The thinking behind the idea came from a lived experience. I think we've all been, over the last couple of years experienced that, a lot of us spend less time, going out for lunch and grabbing lunch. We actually do desk dining, right? Which has become a thing recently. So meetings are booked over lunch. And when people do get the odd chance to go out for lunch, they actually, use it to run errands, picking up kids at school, going to the doctor, physios, all that good stuff. So I think it came from a lived experience, but also an insight that's globally true. And that's what helped us unpack the idea of how do we help people take their lunch back. And that's essentially how Blockbooked was born.
Great. So would you say it was a great case of reverse engineering trend? Lunchtime is supposed to be time with friends, time with food, away from work. So was it a negative sentiment that was being pursued in the market with all of us, as you rightly said? And was that an element that you helped brace this idea?
I understand where you're coming from by saying it's a negative sentiment, but I think from our point of view, it's more around unlocking an opportunity to let go of the constraints that real people were actually having within the office space. I mean, when the idea was brought forward by Ogilvy, it didn't take much for anyone on this side to be convinced by it, because all you had to do was look up during meal times or during lunch and you would see people literally having their meals at their desks or having working sessions. I don't want to say we reverse engineered it. It's just that it was a real insight that definitely people wanted to have their lunch
I guess, returned back to them. And then there was just a really smart idea of how you could actually bring that to life without necessarily disrupting anybody's normal office day.
So the idea of giving lunch back to the consumers, the insight was people were not taking time out. The impact of that visible in the sales before the campaign?
We've always known that lunch is an opportunity that we could potentially go after, and we go after it all the time. So what we did see was an increase over the period, and it was relatively easy to look at the transactions happening over that lunchtime period to see if people were actually making use of the deal. But on top of that, we expect some sort of halo effect from it because, as you may know, not necessarily all coupons are redeemed by consumers. So over that specific period, yes, we did see some uptick in terms of lunch sales.
If there are other marketeers and brands and advertisers listening into this conversation, how would you strike the discussion between an agency and a brand of approaching this from a brand perspective, a marketing promotion perspective, or a technology solution? So if you can tell us the workings behind the scenes of how it came about and what that exact solution was at the end of the day.
If you look at the conversation we've been having, it's all around, people taking their lunch back, right? We saw like one of the biggest blockers was meetings being booked over lunch. How do you make sure that lunch doesn't become a blocker, but becomes something that people can enjoy again? And I think the calendars became a tool that helped us do that rather than something that held us back. I think it was a challenge, obviously, getting people to download the calendars and to configure the calendars. But I think once we'd gotten that part over, it was, wasn't easy from there, but I think it made the task easier. Again, like having a great partner like KFC, as long as you've got an idea that, makes sense. And I think the great thing about this idea is it solved a business problem as well. So I think it made it easier for everyone on Mukundi's side and Mukundi himself to buy into the idea so that we could execute it.
So give us more about blocking the calendar. What does that really mean so that everybody can understand? We've seen the case study, so we know exactly what the email did. But what does it really mean? How did you go about achieving that?
Sure. It was an interesting journey. It was a fun journey. So I think we've got different collectives here at Ogilvy. So there's Ogilvy Johannesburg, which is the Through the Line agency. And then we've got Ogilvy One, who is more of our tech solution-based partner within Ogilvy. So the team were able to build bespoke calendars for different calendar platforms. So if you think, iCalendar, if you think Google, Gmail, even if you take Outlook, the guys had to create bespoke calendars that once people downloaded a certain file, the calendars would automatically fill with all those bookings. So basically, they could book out their lunch for 2 weeks. And when someone clicked into that invite, it looked like a legit calendar booking. So it could be, client presentation to Mukundi or, school run. So things that were blocking people's lunches. And we turned those into actual bookings to help people take their lunch back. We rewarded people who did that with vouchers so they could redeem vouchers for their favorite KFC meals.
And so Mukundi, as a brand owner, there are responsibilities of security and privacy and other issues. How did you manage to get that discussed internally with your teams, with regulations and privacy and so on and so forth? Because this is little bit, if you were to look at it, bit more invasive to actually get into somebody's calendar using their email.
Invasive is a very strong word. I would more categorize it as, because it's not like we were, just putting our own meetings in people's calendars. It was an active process from consumers to go and actually insert the calendar in the invite. So I wouldn't categorize it as an invasion. It was more that we gave them a proposition that was attracted to them. And that inspired them to go in and then, actually get the meeting invite within their diaries. Obviously, from a legal perspective, there's a number of processes that we always follow, regardless of any campaign, to make sure that we are following the rules of the country. We protect consumers' data. We don't use it beyond the, what its stated purpose is for. And of course, we have to follow all of our terms and conditions. And that's always made very clear to any consumer. But at the end of the day, no consumer is going to participate in whatever promo that you have if it doesn't speak to a real insight that is relevant to them.
And this insight that that was there that the time. The campaign was more of a CRM based, as we understand the database that you had. Was it productive use of the email database in your opinion versus innovative use of that database that you had? How did you classify that at the start of the campaign? And then obviously when the success comes, then you can easily say it was a lot more productive too.
So it was an incremental idea on what we already had. However, the proposition was so compelling that it gave us a different way to look at our CRM infrastructure. For the most part, that might be basically selling or maybe informing a customer of what's going on. But this really provided a very different way of engaging with the customer in a much more relevant way, which is why we believe it was even more successful than just your normal use of CRM that you might do on a day-to-day in terms of awareness and just contact with your customer base.
GT, you want to like to add to that?
The key thing about this campaign was obviously leveraging the database that KFC has to kind of send an email to consumers saying, hey guys, we know that you haven't been enjoying your lunch. Here's how you can take your lunch back. Even at that point, people still had to register to go, we'd like to, take lunch back. So they'd first have to register, accept the T's and C's, and then go into block booking their lunches. So I think it was something that was done collaboratively with our audience versus just us kind of invading their space.
What is also very interesting is that a simple thing like a single email can give you an innovation which normally one would not really think of. And a lot of times people tend to forget that there are a lot of these tools that we already have, which we've been using for the last 15, 20 years in digital, but we're always running out after the new shiny object and not utilizing some of the very basics of that. How did you, Mukundi, think of that as when the idea came to you guys that there's an email that's going to go out? What was your first reaction on that?
I think a lot of times when you hear the word innovation, it's this big sounding thing and it can almost make it seem daunting and unachievable. But innovation can be as simple as how do I positively affect your life without necessarily introducing something new. It's just a new way of utilizing things, processes that you're already on a day-to-day level with. I mean, you can imagine from the perspective of this campaign, none of the consumers that actually used it was learning anything new. You receive emails all the time. You block meetings all the time. So the ease of use is very simple, but it was an innovation in terms of your day-to-day, in terms of your lunch. And whilst email might sound outdated in this context because there was a good justification, a good insight, and a benefit to the consumer, not just in terms of a voucher, but actually giving them some time back for themselves, it all resonated. And that was just using things we already had in place.
The first time when I saw the video, I found it very funny that you are trying to solve a real world problem with something as simple as an email going out. How did you guys make sure that people actually use the calendar booking tool? What was that incentive? Was it the promotion? Was it the voucher? Or was it just the need for that personal time? And how did you play that narrative in your communication?
When you've got a strong insight that speaks to people, I think people automatically engage naturally with, your thinking, with your idea. And I think just the idea of giving people their lunch back is already a strong insight. So I think that was the first step, right? It was just landing something that we know our audiences could relate to. And then I think the second thing was then giving them like a nice incentive, a voucher that you can redeem, to enjoy your favorite meals from KFC. So I think for us it was, again, first giving people a chance to take a break from lunch and then reinforcing it and making sure that when they did take their lunch, they eventually get something from KFC. All the other comms that went into the campaign. I think, we had radio, we had social, and I think at every touch point, there was something that drove people to download the calendar so that they can block book their lunches. Just also reminding people that when they do that, there's also a nice incentive for them to do that.
And it had great results. It increased sales, lunchtime sales to about 11%. 16 million social impressions and so on. So all the metrics were ticked, and that's why it was such a great and successful campaign. But which one particular metric you think surprised you the most?
I'm happy to say 11% on the overall lunchtime sale. The lunchtime day part in general, you can imagine, is pretty significant. It's a it's a battle amongst many, many different QSR. So if you can achieve a double digit increase across any layer, never mind lunch, that shows that you've really hit an insight that is definitely valuable to your consumer, your specific consumer that you're targeting. So, yeah, from a sales perspective, we were quite surprised by that. But that just goes to show that when you have a true human insight that resonates, it will also impact your sales in a positive manner as well.
GT?
I think we were expecting a good number, but I think 11% was, was a great conversion for us. As much as impressions are great, I think as agency, making sure that we deliver and answer a business problem from client side is just as important as landing a great idea.
So, building on that, landing a great idea is always consumer driven or consumer dependent, if you will. What would you think was the consumer behavior revelation that you landed yourself on? Or was there one? The fact that they actually booked their calendars. Was that something which was a given when you started this, or was that a new learning that you had?
You obviously want to put ideas in front of your client that you believe in and that you believe will get results. And I think just given how strong the insight was for this idea, we kind of knew that it was going to translate into sales and it was going to, be successful in terms of speaking to our audience and resonating with our audience.
What would be a key lesson or an insight that you would like to share based on the learning that you had of this experience and running this campaign, whether it's innovation, whether it's business, whether it's this creative strategy, etc., or the tools and the people and the story of the consumer behavior?
I think the biggest learning for me is when we talk about innovation, we always think it's this big, scary word. But sometimes innovation can come from how you approach things. We use an email plugged into calendars. It's not something that's like unheard of. It's just that we've never used those tools in that way before. And I think that's one of the best learnings for me is like we also need to kind of reimagine and rethink how we look at innovation.
Interesting.
Just because something is out of fashion today does not necessarily mean it's not impactful to a consumer. You just need to find a way to use it in a way that's relevant. I was a little bit surprised that we never on our own selves ever like came up with this idea with regards to Blockbook, because literally lunch is a massive problem here and we happen to be in food. So sometimes the problem or the opportunity is a little closer to home than what you think, and sometimes you need to just look up and see what's happening around you to find those opportunities.
Interesting. So when you're looking at this as an opportunity to solve a pain point, there are certain elements of this from a consumer perspective, which is the consumer interaction, redemption of the offer, engagement of the trend, etc. What would you say is the impact of social? And I'm not talking about social media as TikTok or any other platform, or Facebook or Google, etc. But just the narrative of social as a concept in marketing and advertising going forward. Because even for this, it is a word of mouth after a point in time, and it helps to build it up. Do you think social has a bigger measurement attribution that can be built for campaigns like this going forward?
In a word, yes. If you invest behind building relationships from a societal and human point of view with the consumer, you actually find a consumer who's far more loyal, far more engaging with your brand, just going very deep into digital aspects and the whole social side of things. We forgot that there's a human element at the end of the day, and we're very much driven by our societal and social relationships that we have with our peers, our friends, our family, etc. So anything that is impactful from a human perspective is going to have a broader business impact as well. Gen Zs are actually revolting almost a little bit against all of this, digitally driven ecosystems, and there's a yearning for days of the past. Nostalgia is coming up as a very, very big topic and theme, because people are looking for that human connection. So I would say social is actually becoming more important as we become more digital and digitized.
And especially in the age of AI, the yearning for social human touch is going to be more important. But let me touch upon my last question on this campaign. CRM, historically or otherwise, is considered to be a very boring, if you will, segment of advertising and marketing. But within that, to find a very seamless way of integrating a new idea, a creative process to get the consumers behind it. What would you say is the ability or the opportunity of CRM to be used, and not just CRM, but consumer data. In how many more possible scenarios you think going forward we can use that data more effectively? In the realm of consumer relationship, do you think there would be more opportunities with maybe existing technology or new technology? And I'm focused more on AI, if you will. Will that help build CRM to be this very powerful sales driven tool?
I mean, it's a very in-depth question. We don't speak in data terms to consumers, right? We speak in, I guess in poetry, for lack of a better word. We present scenarios, we break problems, or we give them opportunities. So in that sense, as long as the data is packaged in a way that we can create stories and opportunities for consumers, then yes, it will always get better. With AI and data, you're only going to get as good out as what you get going in, right? So it's a very complicated question because there's lots of layers to it. With food at the center, and I'm now specifically talking about KFC, and food is a very human thing, right? Food is a ritual, it's a process, it's so many other things towards it that data is just an input. The output of that is never going to be a data point per se. It has to be a human centric story for the consumer at the end of the day.
We all are marketeers, we all are also consumers. So let me ask you a consumer question. Which is your favorite campaign that you remember and why?
Two that I can think of. One, I'm sure you know, an old ad from Oreo. I think it was the first time I ever saw it. Was a little kid sitting outside with his dog, and he took an Oreo and he twisted it and then he licked it. That stuck in my mind because that's all I wanted to do as a kid, right? So there was a ritual behind it. I wanted to try that. And if I think back, it's a very South African GT. I'm sure you'll know it. Scott's Emulsion. I think it's a vitamin C. But what was catchy about it is that it had a song. And that song, if you ask anyone around my age group, they know that song. They can sing it to you verbatim, word for word. I think what you're asking, Rohit, is have we lost the art of being able to build on memory structures as we've become more precise? And I think that is a fair question. I think there's two elements to it. One, yes, it has become a little bit more mechanical and measured in terms of how you get to consumers. But secondly, the consumer is inundated with a lot of communication coming their way. And with the fragmentation of media this day, it's difficult to have like a unifying experience. We're not all watching the same 3 TV channels that were when we were growing up. So we don't have the same reference points, and it's difficult for us to connect, which makes it harder to create those memory structures from the get-go. I do think if you can unlock that, you're obviously going to gain more than your competitors.
Sure. GT?
I think I've got three for you. So the first one is an international campaign, Dumb Ways to Die. I think probably one of my favorite campaigns all time. I mean, again, speaking of like a catchy song, a great insight that speaks to consumers, something that got business results. Second one, Black Label, was called Be the Coach. It literally plays into the idea of how, football fans always think that they know more than the coaches. So yeah, so Be the Coach gave consumers a chance by being the coach. And going back to the conversation around CRM and platforms, at the heart of the campaign was USSD, using USSD to get people to participate. It was an ad for KFC for the Streetwise 2. And it was about this young kid, this young man who every time his granddad would eat food, this kid had bald head. So every time his grandfather would eat his food, he would use the kid's head as a napkin to kind of, clean his hands. And then in the end, the solution, the kid is like, okay, I'm tired of this guy doing this. Let me bring him a Streetwise 2. And in the ad, you literally see the granddad look at his hands, looks at his kid, and then he licks his fingers. Again, finger licking good. So one of my favorite ads ever.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time helping us understand this. It's a campaign that consumers embraced. The idea and the activity that shared their lunch meetings online, generating significant cultural buzz and earned media. By positioning itself as a champion for lunchtime, KFC broke the work-life balance, if you will. It strengthened both short-term sales performance and long-term brand affinity. It was awarded one of the most compelling category awards. It helped on a declining sales pattern. With that, thank you once again, GT and Mukundi, for your time.
Thank you, Rohit. Thanks for having us.